right, welcome everyone. We are back with another special guest for an episode of our series For the Love of Star Wars, where we get our guest to pick one of their favourite pieces of Star Wars media to talk about. Who is that special guest? Well, let's welcome him to the channel for the very first time, Mr. Fan. I knew I was going to do that. Mr. Mangafandanga. Sai. Why'd you have a name like that? Welcome, Sai. You're right.
Well, that's the thing. I chose that, and then I was going to change it because a lot of people did what you do. They struggle with it, but once they get it, once you say Mangafandanga, they get it every time. So I thought I'm sticking with it.
Yeah, too right. All right, let's get straight into it then, Sai. What Star Wars film, episode, or media have you chosen to talk about this week?
I've chosen the return of Darth Maul through the Clone Wars series. So basically, we narrowed it down, and it was the series, episode 22, season 4, Revenge.
The
Darth Maul is actually revived as Darth Maul.
Absolutely, yeah. Going to do my little facts. So this one was directed by Brian Kalin O'Connell, who we've mentioned before for working on some big projects, such as Pirates of the Caribbean, I think was one of them. And this was written by Sai. Do you know who this was written by?
No.
This was actually written by Katie Lucas, George Lucas's daughter. She was responsible for writing on 15 episodes of the Clone Wars, which is interesting.
Why have they not picked up for Disney now?
Exactly, yeah. So this episode had an IMDb rating of 9.1 out of 10, which was the second highest rated episode of the season, behind Carnage of Krell, which I can't quite remember, so I'm going to have to go back and check that one out.
Episode.
Yeah. So, Sai, what is it that you love about this episode?
Well, for me, it goes weirdly back to the 80s. I loved martial arts, and I always loved anything gothic and vampirish and Hammer House. So when I first saw the trailer for The Phantom Menace, which I will still say is the greatest trailer I will ever watch in my life, that trailer for The Phantom Menace was something else. And at the end, when they revealed Darth Maul, and then they revealed this dual lightsaber, and this is coming from a kid who loved martial arts, who loved goth, and I've just seen this tattooed demon, martial arts expert with his two I was 21 at the time. My head just went bang. Do you know what I mean? Like I was 8 years of age.
Yeah.
When they killed him off in The Phantom Menace, I was like gutted. I was like, oh no, we're gonna go through the films without Darth Maul. And then there was a rumor coming around that they're thinking in the Clone Wars of bringing him back, and I was like, how are they going to bring him back? He's completely sliced in half. But how they brought him back is still the most probably creepiest thing I've ever seen in Star Wars.
Yeah,
it was just so manic and frantic. And actually, I mean, even tattooed, as you can tell, I love spiders. I've got a massive love for spiders. My daughter was named after a spider. So to see Darth Maul like that, it was, again, it just eluded it even more how great this character actually is, you know. I loved it.
No, definitely. That opening sort of scene where they actually do bring him back, and he's a bit scatty, he's all over the place, and then and then
sits all around the cave and he's squirreling and he's like, like Shelob from Lord of the Rings. It was like, this is crazy.
Okay, that reference sort of went over my head a little bit, I'm afraid, but but yeah, agreed. It's such a dark episode, isn't it? And Sam Witwer, who they got in to do the voice of Maul, was just fantastic, wasn't he? Even how he changed from being the scatty Darth Maul version, scatty version of him, to being the fierce, Sith version of him is such a great sort of transition, and how they sort of grew the character throughout the episode. It's really, really cool. Martin, what about your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, this is such a good episode. And as Sai said at the beginning, it's kind of, I think it's the third part of the beginning of the Darth Maul storyline throughout the Clone Wars. And we did an episode a few weeks back with Stuart, and he talked about the episode where Darth Maul takes over Mandalore and kills Satine. So we've already sort of talked about the near end of his arc, and it's great to go back now and talk about the beginning. And I mean, I rewatched this episode earlier today before we came on to do this, and I have to say, this is, I mean, obviously, it's everybody knows that Clone Wars was quite a dark animated Star Wars TV show, but this episode, there was a couple of moments in it that I was just shocked that either they didn't pick it up what happened. I mean, I'll go into a few bits later, but there's a couple of moments in this where I thought the censors can't have noticed that, because that is really dark and quite hardcore in terms of violence as well. So and everybody who knows me knows that one of my favorite parts of Star Wars is the dark side of the Force, and the bad guys. They're just the best. Darth Sidious is my favorite Star Wars character. Darth Maul's up there as well. So yeah, overall this was an absolute fantastic episode. Really good.
Would you say you've got a favorite sort of scene from the episode, or a favorite moment, character, or dialogue? I mean, Darth Maul is obviously. I maintain that Darth Maul is one of the greatest of the entire trilogy. Two trilogies, I should say. But one of the greatest characters. But yeah, anything in particular in this episode that you would go to?
Well, like what Martin said, this episode, there are a few. Like, obviously, it's the end of the season. It's going to come into the new season. But there's so many hits in this episode. It's quite hard to choose from. But if there was one that I absolutely loved, it's when Asajj Ventress comes, and you think straight away, that's it. Savage has had it here. But it turns, and she helps Obi-Wan Kenobi out. And in a way, you think to yourself, well, they're all fighting with red lightsabers. First time that's been done.
That's amazing.
It was just, that scene to me was just like, look at this stuff. Yeah, it was brilliant.
Yeah, I always mention how great the lightsaber battles are, and in the Clone Wars in particular, they do it so well, don't they? I don't know how they managed to do such a good job of animating I suppose they're just really good at their jobs, but the animation on these lightsaber battles is always so good and so well choreographed. You get blown away by it.
But I did think that with the original Clone Wars animated as well, they were so well done as well for a 2D animation, the way that them lightsabers were done in the rain, and that fight between Asajj and Anakin is just beautifully done, isn't it?
So good. Yeah, I mean, I think this whole arc story about Darth Maul and the Night Sisters started when Dooku got Savage oppressed from the Night Sisters, and basically Asajj turned oppress against Dooku, and there was that battle between Dooku, Savage oppress, and Asajj Ventress on the bridge of that starship, and that was the first time there was a proper lightsaber battle really in the Clone Wars cartoon. I mean, there were others, but this was next level camera movement, and direction was incredible. And I thought to myself at the time, well, I can't top this. There's just no way. And then each season it's got better and better. And this is the progression, this episode from season 3, where, as Si said, that there's that fantastic lightsaber battle on the bridge, and that it's got everything you want in a Star Wars episode. It's got Obi-Wan quipping, "Red's just not my color," and the sort of stuff you'd expect from George Lucas dialogue and from Star Wars. So I thought that was really cool. But I think my favorite scene of the episode was where Obi-Wan walks into the village, and Darth Maul makes his presence known to Obi-Wan, and Obi-Wan's still not 100% sure that it is actually Darth Maul.
I have been waiting for you.
I'm not sure I've made your acquaintance.
I am surprised you could have forgotten me so easily after I killed your master and you left me for dead on Naboo.
It is you.
You may have forgotten me, but I will never forget you.
That moment where Maul stands in front of the fire, it's
off a splash page on it.
I could not believe what I was seeing. Those flames looked real, didn't they? I mean, they didn't look like they were animation. I thought, how are they achieving this? And this was an animated show that was funded by George Lucas. It wasn't funded by anybody else. And even at that time in season 4, sorry, it was better. It was better than anything else I'd seen in terms of quality of animation, than even some of the movies that were coming out at the time, theatrical releases. And when you saw that, you kind of because it was so good, you forgot that it was animation a little bit, especially during the space scenes when there's ships flying around space. I say put them side by side with a live action scene from space, and you wouldn't be able to pick between the two. They're that good. But yeah, that would be my favourite scene in the episode. And if you'll indulge me, there was one moment I just have to bring up just in case no one else does. There was a moment where Obi-Wan walks into the Jedi Council chamber, and they're watching the transmission from Darth Maul, and he's threatening to kill the lineup of 4 civilians in front of him, and he basically just slashes at them all and decapitates all 4 of them, and then all you can see is the angle of their legs. And if you watch closely, one of their legs starts twitching in the hologram.
Yeah.
And I was watching it today, and I was like, "Oh my god, how did they get away with that? That's really dark, isn't it? I mean, really dark." But at the same time, I was like, "Yeah, but at the same time, that is what he would do, isn't it? That's totally Darth Maul. They got his character dead on. He's lost his place as the Sith apprentice. I think he says when he gets his mind back that he can sense straight away that the Clone Wars has started and there's a disturbance in the Force, and that his master's plan had gone into overdrive, and he knew that his place was lost now in that plan. As far as he was concerned, he was going to be the master at some point, and because of Obi-Wan, all of that had gone. I mean, what a great dialogue and great episode. I could go on.
I suppose looking back on what he said there, Martin, he would be like how Vader was through that, The Empire Strikes Back and stuff. He would have been that second in command. He would have been the important one, and you see the mythness in it that he's missed the Clone Wars. He's like, I can't believe it, and like. Great show, yeah.
There's a quote here from the episode that I wrote down because I thought I'd never remember it. When him and Savage Opress land on the planet, and the ramp comes down, and Savage is questioning him, how are we going to get the Jedi here?
What are we doing here? The Jedi won't be out this far in the galaxy.
In a galaxy at war, Savage, there is only one way to get the attention of the Jedi. Slaughter of the innocent, mercilessly and without compromise.
So, whoa, what great dialogue, and how badass and evil was that? I mean, it's great dialogue. I can just imagine Katie Lucas sort of writing this script and then sort of popping it over to her dad's house just to say, any tips or anything, and he's like sort of giving her tips of saying, no, that's fine. And I just love the fact that, George's daughters had something to do with this. And I totally agree with what Si said at the beginning. She should have been involved now, or at least, she wrote
that episode, because like what you just said, then 23-minute episode today is more like Star Wars to me than the whole last 12 years has done. And that's, like you just said, from a cartoon show that's aimed at families, and yet it just going back to it was like, this is Star Wars in a sense,
definitely.
Not knocking anything new. People like what they like, that's great. But it's not, it's had that missing Star Wars element to me. And yet going back to that, I was like, it's which made me even think, do you know what? I might just go back and watch all these Clone Wars all over again. And, they were that good though, weren't they? That good storytelling. They were that good.
So Si, what did you make of? I mean, obviously we're trying to be specific to this episode, but as you would have seen on other episodes, they all link together in some way with other films and episodes. But what did you make of the whole Darth Maul storyline through the Clone Wars? From him being resurrected, if you like, right up until the end of season 7, where he escapes from the Star Destroyer with Ahsoka. I mean, did you think it worked well the entire way through?
Yeah, and for me, look, all the rest of the Clone Wars, my favourite episodes were them episodes when Darth Maul were in them, and there was that relationship, and Ahsoka started to come in, and it all started to transform more, and you got more of an in-depth. Because to be fair, it's like Boba Fett in the original Star Wars films. You didn't really get much out of the Phantom Menace of Darth Maul, apart from he looked absolutely brilliant and he was great at fighting. So. I don't know. I think the Clone Wars proper really went into the depth of that character, even right up to, I mean, I won't spoil it because obviously somebody might come and talk about that episode, but even right up to the end, it felt right even then. He's a perfect character that for me never should have gone so soon, but would he have had the impact now if they'd have kept him alive like that.
That's a really good point.
Maybe the worry was that he was going to like overtake a Darth Vader. He could have done. There could have been 3 or 4 films in where you would have thought this guy's better than Vader is, and maybe that was the point.
That's a really good point. I never thought of that. I think you've hit on something now. I don't think if they had kept him alive in episode 1 that he would have been popular. I think the fact that he's been brought back alive and then he's done what he's done has made him more of a popular character, because he would have been basically punk. If he'd have stayed into episode 3, say, basically Darth Vader would have just like taken him out easily, wouldn't he, to become the next Sith Lord, and it would have been a bit of an anticlimax. So I think you're right. Interesting.
Because he was extremely strong with the Force, Darth Maul, and it was even proven when he came back, because when his brother rounds in the lightsaber, he doesn't take it off him. He sees if he's still got the Force.
Yeah.
And he does the Force, then grabs it, and then thinks, stands up, and his legs are a bit dodgy, but then he remembers I'm one with the Force, and just runs like, off he goes with him standing up in seconds off on that table. And maybe that was the thinking. Get rid of him having too much in it, because again, would Boba Fett have took over them? So if we'd had more of Boba Fett in the originals, and he went on these bounty hunting journeys like we all wanted and stuff, would have been a bit more like they overshadow others, don't they? So,
well, George Lucas, for his treatment of the sequel trilogy, he had Darth Maul back as the main villain for the sequel trilogy. And he was going to have an apprentice. Darth Talon was going to be his apprentice. So if George hadn't sold the company, we would have got Darth Maul back for 3 more films. So what could have been, eh?
So was it actually George Lucas then that wanted to bring Darth Maul back? So did he think himself, I think I've killed him off too early, or?
I think the plan was always. I mean, I don't know 100%, but I think from what I've read, the plan was always to kill him at the end of episode 1. And just like with Boba Fett, the fan sort of outrage and the fan sort of disappointment that he was gone probably needed a villain for the Clone Wars, for a storyline. So they thought, well, I think George said in one of the documentaries on the Blu-rays of the Clone Wars series, Dave Filoni explains that George just turned up to his office one day and said, Darth Maul's coming back. And Dave Filoni was kind of like, you chopped him in half and he's dead. And George just turned to him and said, no, he's alive, like that. And then he just walked away. So that Dave knew he had to get him into the story. So I think a lot of people say George never listened to the fans, but I think he probably did. And he realised I made a mistake, and, it's all conjecture on my part. I don't know for sure, but that was what I would hope happened anyway. But I mean, this was just the start for him in this episode, wasn't it? Sort of establishing himself again. It's such a good episode. So, and Asajj Ventress, at this point in the episode, she's a bounty hunter now, isn't she? And as you say, when she turns up at the ship, when initially I thought, as you did, that perhaps she would be after Obi-Wan as well, and Savage, and obviously Maul would sort of get in the mix. But I thought it was quite a nice sort of pairing, the two of them, Obi-Wan and her. I'm thinking you thought the same.
It's a great scene. Like, I love that scene where she just passes in one of her lightsabers and says, I want that back. You know what I mean? Because obviously they're like, I just love that. Do you know what I mean? And like he says, doesn't he? No, you can have it, red's not my colour. Do you know what I mean?
It's brilliant.
But it's just little things like that you never expect to wish a Dathomir and, Jedi Knights team up to fight, and it's
definitely
them two brothers together. And knowing as well that Darth Maul had a brother was so cool as well. And he was yellow when he was red, and it was like, this is great. And how he found him was brilliant,
Yes, it's nice that they introduced the witches of Dathomir, the Night Sisters, and I didn't feel like I'm not going to go into any negatives, but recently we might have seen some things that we didn't believe, and instantly the Knights of Ren, the witches of Dathomir, we were like, yep, that makes sense. They're they use the Force in a different way. We don't question it. That's how it is, because it was so well written and so well staged. The thing I noticed as well when they do get back to Dathomir is there's all the dead bodies of the Night Sisters, and I hadn't seen this episode since before I watched the Tales of the Empire episode where Morgan Elsbeth is one of the Night Sisters and General Grievous is attacking Dathomir and killing all the Night Sisters. So it was kind of cool to watch that episode knowing that somewhere up in the mountains was Morgan Elsbeth with another tribe of Night Sisters. Of course, we didn't know, and they didn't know at the time that was the case. But I do love the way these sort of things link together now.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what did you think of the Tales of the Empire?
I haven't watched any of them yet.
Have you not? Oh, okay.
The last one I watched. I watched the ones where Count Dooku was young, when we had an apprentice, and but I haven't watched any of the follow-ons or anything like that up to them. So, again, I'm always stuck to my art desk. It's so hard for me to catch up with anything.
Yeah, so I've just ruined that for you. Sorry, mate.
No, don't worry about that. No, think about that bother me now. Again, with them being backstories and things like that, they don't really spoil it, for like, when somebody told me that Gambit was in Deadpool and Wolverine, that was a spoiler.
I still haven't seen it yet.
No, I haven't.
They are spoiling things.
I knew it anyway,
with that film, it's impossible not to be spoiled. There's so much goes on in it, apparently.
No.
So,
but yeah, it was like you said, Martin. Every scene from this was like darker, dark, bit more darker. There's a bit darkness for you, a bit more dark. It's like every bit, wasn't it? It's like
yeah. It's quality, though.
Absolutely, yeah. So there's all that talk of Savage Opress. I've got a random question for you. If he was to show up in live action, who would you choose to play him?
Oh, for me, I'm funny, me, Adam. I always like unknowns for roles like that. I don't like famous people in a role that's quite famous to us in a sense. It's like when they introduced the new Superman, I was dead happy. I had no idea who he was. Do you know what I mean? And that's what I prefer for Star Wars and for superhero movies and that sort of stuff. An unknown that we can look at in 20 years and say, it's like Hugh Jackman for Wolverine. To be fair, we know nobody knew who Jackman really was before Wolverine. As soon as Wolverine hits, we now see him as Wolverine for the past 20 years, and that's what I sort of prefer.
Yeah,
there's going to be some great actors that could do it, but I'd rather an unknown.
Yeah, no, that's fair, and that is quite often sort of the case with a lot of Star Wars stuff, isn't it? So, yeah, can't argue with that, really. Can't argue. Yes. So overall, then, what makes this episode feel like Star Wars to you?
Again, it's my love of the dark side and the Empire and the Sith Lords and all that sort of stuff, and it didn't feel like normally with the Clone Wars, with all Star Wars episodes, you'll get a couple of fillers in and you'll get some that are just like passing the time. There'll be some childish episodes in a sense because it is a family show. It's aimed at everybody,
Yeah.
But now and again, it'll hit you with something that's just pure Star Wars, and this just felt like that to me. It just did.
Yeah.
Again, the love of Darth Maul, probably one of my favourite ever characters in Star Wars, and to be returned like that, brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely. Martin, any more to add?
I mean, a few little things that we've mentioned in previous episodes. I mean, if you look at the way the episode has been directed, it's got all of the classic Star Wars wipes, and it's got the at the beginning. The first thing you see in the episode is this zoom that's just, you follow the camera really quickly into the docking bay where Darth Maul's hiding behind those crates, and that reminded me a lot of the sort of stuff you'd see in the prequel trilogy. That just that there's certain shots when a ship comes out of light speed in this episode. I think 2 ships come out of light speed to go down to Felucia. Again, the way the camera is angled and they're coming out of light speed and then they sort of float past the camera down to the planet, teeny little things like that, which subconsciously we all think, oh, that's Star Wars because it's always been like that. And I think the problem is people try and reinvent stuff, and Clone Wars is a classic example of it's successful because it's not reinventing it. You get different stories, but it's using the same way of filming, the same lighting effects, the same character choices, the same dialogue, the same sort of stuff that exists in Star Wars. So by all means, freshen stuff up, but I don't think you have to change it. And I think this is another episode that's a great example of that. It's a shame that Obi-Wan's an Everton supporter because he doesn't like red. I mean, what can you do?
Ridiculous.
I mean, Savage Opress. Sorry, not Savage Opress. Sarge Ventress in this episode. I loved everything about it, but there's something about that character, and I love her story in this. She's like sort of a tragic character in this, and it's great to see her. I won't ruin it for Sai, but she does come back again in later media. and it's great to sort of see her origins in this episode again, sort of working through the story. And there's a great moment in the episode where she's up on the balcony and she does that great Jedi sort of thing that Ahsoka was doing in the episode Shabby was talking about, where she sort of just floats back into the darkness and disappears like a samurai or a ninja. I thought that was fantastic. Does that make me feel it looks like Star Wars? I think so. At least, you know, I didn't question it when I watched it.
Yeah.
And overall, I think the biggest compliment I can give it is I couldn't wait to watch the next part of this. And every week I'd watch the trailer for the next episode when season 5 came out. Is it a Darth Maul episode? Is it a Darth Maul episode? So the storyline itself is absolutely riveting. And, you know, that's George Lucas, Dave Filoni, the writers, you know, of the Clone Wars in general. So I think it's nice to talk about these Clone Wars episodes because it's the last thing George had any involvement in. So, you know, Star Wars is Star Wars, but anything that George was involved in, for me personally, in my opinion, is nailed on, 100% guaranteed Star Wars, whether you like it or you don't. I always, you know, hold these sort of things in high reverence. So yeah, sorry to windbag, but yeah. What about you, Adam?
Well, I mean, yeah, it's same really. The great lightsaber battles, I harp on about those, but the darkness of this particular episode was fantastic, and the peril, you know, that they involve everyone in, really, especially Obi-Wan. But I was just going to ask you before I forget. Do you remember how you? I'm assuming you watched these when they were released, as they were released.
Yeah.
But did they do them like an episode a week? Because obviously the way things are streamed nowadays, sometimes they release everything all in one go. I'm assuming they did it week by week.
I'm sure it was. It was every Wednesday, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was every Wednesday on Cartoon Network, I think it was, wasn't it?
Yeah. It was on the Cartoon Network, a weekly.
But obviously they leave it more or less on a cliffhanger at the end of the episode. So, like, how long did you have to wait for season 5? Because I've only watched these like afterwards on DVD and everything. So
it would have been a year, wouldn't it?
Do you know, that's a good one. It must have been 8 months to a year. Surely it must have been to get it all finished off, if I'm right.
Yeah, I think when season 1 came out, they were already working on season 3. So they were always 2 seasons ahead. So because obviously it took such a long time to get the animation done and all the storyboarding, voice actors, etc. So they were always 2 seasons ahead. So it was always a year between seasons, definitely.
Yeah. That wait between season 4 and season 5 must have been excruciating.
Yeah.
You always are, aren't they? Yeah.
Well, thankfully they kicked off season 5 with the next episode, but originally they were going to hold off that episode until the sort of near the end of season 5. But the reaction to that episode that we're talking about today, Revenge, was so good that they took one of those episodes away from the Darth Maul arc that we were talking about with Stu, and put it right at the beginning of the season, which, you know, thank God, because it was
But Star Wars has that thing in making you wait, like in Empire, when he asks it, when he's to the Jedi, when he says to Yoda, "Is he my father?" Yoda goes, "Oh, just forget it." Like, you're like, wait 3 years, tell him, you know, like. So it does do that, doesn't it? Star Wars? Yeah.
Well, it was always nice to wait 3 years between films, wasn't it, back in the day? Because you had 3 years of hype. You know, things to try and guess were going to happen. Yeah, it was great, and I miss those times. Don't get me wrong, it's nice to have Star Wars kind of on tap, but I don't necessarily think it might be a good thing for the franchise. Sometimes it's nice to have a bit of a wait.
Yeah. That's true. Maybe Star Wars on tap is what's created half the problems today. You know, maybe the fatigue's kicked in. I mean, obviously, good Star Wars fatigue will never kick in for us boys. We love Star Wars from day one. Yeah. But oversaturation can get too much. It can
definitely. Well, Si, it was an absolute joy having you on to talk about this. Thank you for coming on. Is there anything you have to promote at the moment?
Not really. Just Tub Thumpers on Wednesday. That's the show I do with Shabby Geek, and that's about it. That's my YouTube journey.
Yeah.
Thanks to everyone for watching. Then like and subscribe as always, and let us know in the comments what you thought about this Clone Wars episode. I'm off to go and watch season 5 now to see how Kenobi and Ventress love saga progresses. So we'll catch you all in the next one. We'll see you later.
Bye.